Hello, and welcome back. And I hope everyone's gotten some water or caffeine, carbs, whatever it is that you need to keep you going. And we're about to start session 2. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel for today's discussion, AI and its impact in Connecticut. We're joined by experts and leaders from a variety of fields who will share their insights into how AI is shaping our communities, our economy, and our daily lives. First, we have Vahid Behzadan, Associate Professor in Computer Science and Data Science at the University of New Haven, and the co-founder of the Connecticut AI Alliance. Next, Jessica Dodge, Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, running Connecticut's Office of Innovation. We're also honored to have Senator James Maroney, representing the public policy perspective and helping guide the state's approach to emerging technologies. Joining him is Dr. Suzanne Rose, the Executive Director of Research at Stamford Health, who has gained recent notoriety for her research using AI as a diagnostic tool. And guiding today's conversation is our moderator, Angela Eichhorst, the Connecticut Mirror's first AI data reporter and product developer, who will help us navigate these diverse perspectives and ensure we explore the full scope of AI's impact here in Connecticut. They won't be sitting underneath their pictures, so we're going to make the audience work today. So please join me in welcoming them.
Yeah, we did all right. We did okay.
Two of us did.
Can we give it up one more time for my wonderful panelists here? Thank you.
Close, we did all right.
I'm really excited for today's conversation because we're bringing in perspectives from 4 different sectors in Connecticut. And I'm really excited to hear about their experience with AI and going further into the future, what AI has done in Connecticut so far. So I wanted to start with Senator Maroney and ask you, could you tell me about a time that you've seen AI make someone's life better?
Yeah, I think there are so many different ways that we hear that AI is going to help make our lives better. It's going to help us live longer, more fully. I think in one of the best ways is the ability to give people back agency. And so an example of that is I've worked with a legislator from Delaware, Krista Griffith, who is very excited for self-driving cars. And the reason she's excited about self-driving cars is she has a son with an intellectual disability. And her hope is that in the future, this will give him the ability to travel, right, for him to be able to move around on his own. And so I think giving back agency in that way, but also in communication, right? In real-time translation, facilitating communication between people. But those are some of the ways that I see it's really helping us now.
Awesome, thank you. And I wanted to ask Vahid if you'd be able to share an example of a way that you've seen AI improve someone's life.
Well, as you're aware, AI has been around for quite a while, and it has been making many of our lives better consistently throughout the day, from Google Maps or any navigation software, to search engines, to social media feeds, to our ability to find small pieces of useful information in large amounts of data. AI has been consistently proven to be a useful technology in different sectors, different aspects of life. But with large language models, the ability to produce readable, comprehensible, meaningful text or even different modalities in a short amount of time has been very helpful to academics, specifically to students who come from backgrounds and cultures that do not speak English. So many of my students are international students who struggled before in communicating or showing up, having representation in their community. Now, with accessibility to large language models, quite a bit of that particular gap has been addressed.
Right, so translation and the language potential there. Thank you. And then I wanted to ask Dr. Suzanne Rose if you could tell us a bit about your research on mammograms and coronary heart disease.
Sure. So we know that coronary artery disease is a leading cause of death, and it actually impacts women more than men. So there's been a ton of progress in preventing heart attacks and major adverse cardiovascular events in men, but not so much in women. And we know that there's a lot of changes that go on in a woman's body, and so we really need to find a way to identify women earlier on that have unknown cardiac disease. And so we did research using artificial intelligence that can read a standard of care mammogram. There's nothing additional that's done for a patient. There's no extra testing, no extra radiology. And it can detect breast arterial calcification, which is a known prognostic factor in letting us know if a person does have coronary artery disease. So that to me is very exciting, that millions of women across the globe get mammograms every single year. For most of us, it's after the age of 40. We go once a year. And so to have something we're already going to do, women actually usually go get mammograms more than they go see their primary care physician. And certainly many, many less actually go to see a cardiologist and would have other testing that might indicate they have coronary artery disease.
That's really amazing. Could you break down like how you developed it? Like what is the iteration that makes it different from what you had before? Like where does the AI meet the skills and the tools that you had before?
So we actually work with a company that's located out in California, and they developed the AI algorithm. So we were part of a large conglomerate of academic medical centers, which Stanford is not an academic medical center. We do high-level research, which is amazing that we get to be included in a lot of these academic medical center projects. And so we were able to work with that company. And the way they developed the algorithm was they took 20,000 mammograms, and they actually had the AI algorithm learn what does breast arterial calcification look like. And they did that in conglomeration with 2 radiologists reading each mammogram. So they were able to create this level that had a very high amount of predictability with the model. So then what we did is we took women who had had a mammogram. We did this all retrospectively. So we looked all the way back into our records from 2012 and pulled data from almost 10 years. And so we looked at women who had had any type of chest CT. And then we looked to see if they also had coronary artery disease on their chest CT. And then if they also had the breast arterial calcification. So we were able to closely correlate if they already had CAD, coronary artery disease, and they also had breast arterial calcification. And then how did that predict their major adverse cardiac events? Did they have any strokes? Did they have heart attacks in that period that we were studying? And so how that's different is that now when a radiologist is looking at a mammogram, they're not looking for heart disease. They're looking for breast cancer because we know that breast cancer is a leading cause of death and one of the major cancers that impact women or men with the BRCA gene. So we want to find a new modality for women who are coming in that aren't going to see a primary care physician or a cardiologist because they may not know they have disease. Now, if a physician sees the breast arterial calcification, they usually write it in their finding, but it's not a requirement because they're hyper-focused on how do we catch breast cancer at the earliest stage. So now we have 2 modalities. We can look at, does a woman have breast cancer or not, and do they also have breast arterial calcification, which may mean that they have coronary artery disease.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really developed that in consultation with physicians, that they were doing the verification, they were using their expertise to verify if it was right and building that into the model over time.
Yeah, it's not replacing physicians. So that's a question I get all the time, is AI going to replace our physicians? And when we're using AI technology, and I know other hospitals and all around the world, it's an augmentation. It's adding extra value to what a physician is already adding. So I think that our physicians will always be front and center. And AI is a technology that is interwoven and letting us see things that maybe we wouldn't have seen before.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask Jessica, if you could share an example of a way you've seen AI make someone's life better. I know you work with businesses and entrepreneurs.
Sure, absolutely. So, ironically, I was originally going to reference a personal experience of all things, in that somebody I know had a similar situation where a typical ultrasound as a follow-up to their mammogram would have resulted in 150 or so pictures designed to be reviewed exclusively by a human, and instead they opted for a route where the device and the review that was AI enabled allowed for almost, I believe the number was 9,000 images, and indicated something very unexpected in one of the results that they had not planned on when they originally booked their annual appointment. So I think there's a lot of personal correlation to the use of artificial intelligence, but I was just talking to a colleague the other day where we have a number of different things that we can effectively use artificial intelligence to do that allow us to just really be efficient in the use of our time. And I think that that's the thing that hopefully takes a little bit of the sting and the scary out of when people talk about artificial intelligence. We were talking about man-made materials and how when we are looking at the way in which we take different molecule structures and have combined them to produce various polymers and plastics and things that we use every single day. Those were a lot of trial and error, right? Chemists, a lot of review and study. But to be able to put different compounds into something that is artificial intelligence at its baseline, to present a dumped out, prioritized list of ways in which we should start looking at other potential products and materials that would ultimately be very beneficial to people and to humans at various capacities all over the place, and not burn that kind of time or experimentation along the way, is just a really good example of making sure that it's not just something that is around coding and things that are not, in a very real sense, tangible. These are materials, these are products, these are things that you would use in a heart valve transplant, that you would use in various medical devices and rubbers and plastics all over the place. And those are things that we can continue to use AI to be efficient in prioritizing what's next. How do we continue to evolve, even in a material sense, using the AI technology?
Yes, and Suzanne brought up augmentation, using AI to augment what someone is already doing, as opposed to agentic AI, which takes it and runs with it and does the task in place of a human. And I'm wondering if any of you have thoughts about use of augmented AI versus agentic AI. Where do you think the pitfalls are for each of them? Where do you think the potentials for success are in those?
Well, I can try to go first. So if we adopt a very broad definition for AI as being automated decision-making or computational decision-making for tasks that are exclusively within the domain of human decision-making, then it's immediately obvious with everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, we could definitely use a little bit of help on the side of automating decision-making, not just in our day-to-day lives, but particularly at work. There are instances of human decision-making being specifically identified as the root cause of harm, accidents, unintended consequences. For instance, many driving accidents or many aircraft and airplane mishaps and accidents are attributed to driver or pilot error. So in those cases, perhaps utilizing a more consistent computational decision maker could facilitate a safer, more reliable operation. But at the same time, there are many cases where these systems do not generalize as well as a biological instance of intelligence, i.e. human beings, can generalize. So we aren't yet at a point where we can rely on AI for everything or even anything in the long run.
I would only add to that, I know the speaker previously spoke a little bit to the idea that artificial intelligence is going to be the next revolution where the profession is that of checkers. I do think that there is a lot to be said for the fact that at the moment, for where we are, leveraging artificial intelligence as a tool is in the best interest of everybody in this room, every professional who is looking to grow and scale, a number of the individuals that we care and love that are exiting schools and wondering how they get entry-level jobs, which in theory are dissolving by use of artificial intelligence. There should be a leverage point in which we are continuing to use artificial intelligence to amplify and allow us to be more efficient. I would suggest at this juncture not to take the place of, but to amplify and to sit on top of or alongside the human element of review.
Yeah, sorry, if I can ask a follow-up to you, Jessica. I know, you work a lot in the entrepreneur space, and I'm wondering if you have any stories of companies in Connecticut who are really using AI to their advantage and running with it or going with it, and kind of what you see in that space of actual right now development.
So I think what's really interesting in the space of artificial intelligence as it relates to startups, I run, as was introduced, the Office of Innovation, which it lives inside of our Department of Economic and Community Development. We are really fortunate in the state where we have a Chief Innovation Officer. That's pretty unique. And we really are very driven to leading in the space of innovation, and entrepreneurs, as you can imagine, are pretty integral to that. If you ever want to find a group of people that immediately want to think outside of the box, they're your people. And on top of it, they hear no all day long and get up and do it all over again because they believe in what is coming, not what's actually here. So in the space of artificial intelligence, there's actually a company that I had worked with many moons back who began as an idea. They're actually incubating at the moment at a UConn lab, the TIP incubator program. They were looking at biopsies for cancer patients and finding different ways to assess the effectiveness of different types of treatment, multiple types of treatment all at once. So instead of you going through the entire course of treatment A, oh shoot, didn't work, let's go back and start again, treatment B, that unfortunately does not work either. We're going back over and over and over again to the detriment in the health of the patient, the family, and all of the things in between, the cost of the healthcare system, et cetera. They're generating a tremendous amount of data, right? So every time they're testing those 6 treatments all at the same time with a patient who demographically looks like X, Y, or Z, has the ability now to generate a data point. And so there's a lot of ongoing conversations with companies like that, and how do we take data, which is really the foundation for effective use of artificial intelligence, and produce something that gives us the ability to predict in a way that ultimately benefits us as humans. That's a really cool one. I don't mean to double down on the healthcare system, but I do think it's probably a space. Biotechnology in particular is really exciting in the use of artificial intelligence and the eventual use of quantum technologies as well. So it's hard not to double down on it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, there's lots of challenges to starting a startup or business. And I'm wondering, AI can be portrayed as a silver bullet to solve all problems. I'm wondering if you could share what problems businesses face that you think AI is really good at helping solve, and what are some problems that AI cannot solve and or at the moment unclear, and differentiating between those kinds of problems.
Sure. I assume that's to me again? It's
Yes.
to me again. Shame, sorry, Al. So in short, small businesses and medium-sized businesses, to bring artificial intelligence on board can be expensive. And so there's the initial sort of cost shock, right? There's an expense that is incurred in trying to make sure that you are getting up to speed. There's also the sort of skill mismatch, and we see this a lot when we're talking about the mid-level employees or those that, I think there was a gentleman earlier who asked a question as it related to too young to retire, but not old enough yet, or forgive me, you were more articulate than I am, about being too old. You all heard it. He's not old. But in short, trying to figure out what you do to make sure you're not replaced by artificial intelligence in its entirety. So we have that skill mismatch, and we actually talk about that a ton, and I'm sure Senator Maroney would echo this as well, and figuring out good ways to ensure that we are lifting up this next generation of learners and ensuring that there is an upskill for the use of artificial intelligence in these entry-level jobs, as well as the sort of mid-level management jobs. I'd say that the last thing, and probably most important for our very small businesses, is really the sort of data security piece of it. Everybody gets, my personal opinion to this is that the scariest part of artificial intelligence as we now continue to see it used in a day-to-day fashion, right? If anybody's children or grandchildren are sending them weird photos, we're seeing it every single day, right? These sort of hybrid images that come to us from artificial intelligence. That's fun and silly and playful, but when we talk about businesses in particular, data security is obviously very, very important for artificial intelligence use.
Yes, James, you've worked to pass laws on data privacy and AI as well as funding, and I'm wondering if you could talk about those efforts to date and
Yeah, thank you. And I think, as you mentioned, talking about businesses, small businesses, what are the most beneficial uses? I think that the true economic or the biggest economic impact is going to come from adoption of AI within our small businesses. And that's really as a state where we can help them, right, to help them adopt. And so one of the things we've worked at creating is the Connecticut Online AI Academy, which is free generative AI training for anyone in Connecticut. You can go to charteroak.edu. And a lot of times you'll hear when you talk about jobs and the loss of jobs. And every technological revolution in the past has created more jobs than it's caused or killed, but they're not going to be the same, right? And so while some people say it's not AI that's going to take your job, it's someone who knows how to use AI that's going to take your job, that ignores the reality that there are jobs that are going to be lost. And we need to make sure we're retraining and being intentional and thoughtful. And my friend Delegate Maldonado from Virginia likes to point out that a lot of the jobs that are going to be lost are jobs that are done by women, and very often women of color. And Bureau of Economic Research shows that 1 in 3 women are in jobs that are at risk of being automated by AI, whereas less than 1 in 4 men are in jobs that are at risk of being automated by AI. So we're working at making sure we're being intentional and thoughtful with how we're rolling out training programs and not just offering an online opportunity, but partnering with nonprofits. My big concerns, I guess, when you talk about, I'm an optimist, for the future of AI and what it can do to help us and to benefit society, but I don't think there are zero risks, right? And I think my big concerns have been in employment, in that 98% of Fortune 500 companies are using automated decision-making within their hiring process. So if it's not tested, right, to make sure it's fair and accurate. My other big concern is in housing. 50 to 75% of large landlords are using AI for screening tenants, and a lot of times decisions have been based on erroneous data.
Yep.
So what we did in our data privacy law in regards to the housing is you have the right to opt out of decisions, but then you have the right to see the data it was based on and the right to correct that data. But the employment is still an issue we need to solve for.
yeah, and in the employment, I wanted to ask, what are you seeing, and anyone feel free to answer this, the top skills that employers are looking for, are asking for of young people entering the workforce or anyone reskilling, retooling, or going back into the workforce?
So if I may just to address quickly the element of hiring and the loss of jobs that is really a fear factor as it relates to workforce and artificial intelligence. I think that there's a lot of discussion around bias that may or may not be present in training these models. And we talk a lot about that, but if I may, there is intrinsic human bias in a lot of hiring processes as well. And so the difference in the utilization, I think very effectively, of tools around artificial intelligence is really ensuring that the inputs that go into the tools that we're using to model are absolutely that of reviewed by humans and individuals. There's a sort of chemistry match, if you will, in particular with hiring, that computers have yet to really do a good job taking the place of a human to do. But the idea that we can use these models effectively in avoiding some of that bias at the onset, or appropriately delegating prioritization where it makes sense for your organization, be it a skill set, be it a sort of need to fit in a role. There is also a really good use case for artificial intelligence on the hiring front for those purposes as well. Forgive me, I jumped in with my own answer to a question you didn't ask. Skills employers are looking for. Thank you.
Well, I also, I wanted to ask Vahid also, as a professor yourself and you're talking to college students, kind of how are you hoping to train those skills or bring those out in your students?
So I'm an AI professor and I specialize in AI safety and security. My entire research is about when things go wrong. But at the same time, as a faculty member in a computer science program or an AI program, we emphasize on AI literacy from 4 different angles. One is understanding the basics of how AI technology works, the fact that ChatGPT and AI aren't equivalent terms, and then comes usability, being able to use AI tools, and that includes evaluating AI tools. And the next item is understanding the shortcomings of these tools. So none of these AI tools that were mentioned today are going to be perfect. Actually, there is one statement that I think is core to everything that I do in my professional and personal life. All models are wrong. All models are wrong, from Newtonian gravity to quantum mechanics to Einstein's relativity to machine learning models. One of the things that these words have in common is that they all describe models, and all models are wrong, but some are useful. This is one of the things that we emphasize on to our students. These models are not as reliable as an expert yet in a lot of different cases. Well, there are some cases where superhuman performance has been consistently shown, but for now, human in the loop is needed because somebody needs to take the blame if something goes wrong.
Right, and the speaker before also talked about having multiple models, and models are specifically good at something. Yes.
I just want to, because to what you just said, 1979 IBM employee manual said computers can't be held responsible, so they should not be making management decisions. So that human in the loop, that necessity. But then going back to what are the skills, some of the good thing is it's putting emphasis on critical skills. And you look at a lot of the people in these top AI jobs, a lot of them were philosophy majors and other majors. And so it's putting emphasis on thinking and critical thinking.
I studied religion, so there you go.
Yeah, pretty much philosophy, right? Along those lines of the thinking, right? How to think, how to approach a problem. I think employers are looking for durable skills. That's one of the things, you used to say soft skills. Now you're pushing towards durable skills. You show up on time. You can ask questions, communication. As far as for AI, right now I would say the two most important skills are responsible use, right? Understanding, as you said, all models are wrong, right? You have to fact check different things. And then lifelong learning, right? We all have to be comfortable with the fact that things are going to change and that we need to all stay current and continue to learn throughout life.
Thank you. Yeah, and Suzanne, what would you say to that as well? You're a professor yourself. How are you looking to cultivate those skills in your students or other skills too?
So I have several jobs open at the hospital, and I have a finance analyst position open, and I received hundreds of applications. And as I'm reading them, and I would try to do 10, 20 at a time, not to get fatigued, but they all started looking exactly the same. And the skill set for everyone was exactly the same. I started realizing that probably 80 to 90% of people who had submitted for that specific application had used AI to write their resume. I'm down to the font, everything. And so I just automatically started rejecting them because if you can't take the time and you can't tell me about what you did, and I'm sure people said, these are my skills, augment or do whatever you will, but I'm looking at these, everyone could do Power BI, everyone could do all these skills, and I started saying, why do these all look exactly the same? Are they plagiarizing each other? They don't even know each other. And so it's really to have that eye to say, to step away from using AI so much. I've also been in a lot of interviews lately where I'm noticing people not staring at the camera and kind of hesitating on their answers, and they're using AI or ChatGPT in the background to say, how should I answer this question? And so I think AI is wonderful, but I do think it needs to be used very cautiously. And also for those of us who are at least Gen X and more, we have those soft skills. We have that intellectual understanding to know something's a little bit off. And so you can't replace the people. And I do think that the generations coming up can harness AI in a very good way, but they have to be cautious about how they're harnessing it.
I would just say, so keeping in mind that a lot of the organizations that I work with very directly, in addition to big industry, we deal a lot with the startups, and so they're very small. So although not specifically a skill set, one thing that I really do like about the state of Connecticut and our workforce in particular is that our university system, where a lot of these individuals come from, is by and large incredibly strong. It is one of the most amazing resources that we do have here in our state is the talent that's coming out of the university systems. And so what we continue to do with the universities in particular, for a small business, as you can imagine, there's not a tremendous amount of budget or amount of time to really get somebody from theoretical concept work that may have existed in a classroom environment to very practical use and implementation on the job. And so I continue to be really impressed in partnership and collaboration with our universities in particular at trying to find ways to evolve the curriculum and adapt so that the skill set that you're leaving an institution with, be it the undergraduate or graduate level, is really paired very nicely with elements of critical thinking. We obviously have a lot of liberal arts schools here in the state, so that is really important. It's sort of this open-mindedness, perpetual ask why, and pairing that with elements of additional certification or layered on programming work that can really give a lot of those tactile skills. So the small businesses and medium-sized industries that are looking to have you hit the ground running, those things I think are really impressive and sort of the foundational work that gets the skill set active.
A quick follow-up to all the great points that were made by Susan and Jessica. On the hiring side, we are seeing that many of our students are constantly worried about the tools that they need to use, not only the tools that they need to be proficient in, but the tools that they need to use to be able to get past the first AI filter of any job application. I remember before the LLM Cambrian explosion in 2022, many of our students had to subscribe to tools that added certain keywords to their resumes or cover letters that would allow them to get past the ill-defined or very narrowly defined AI filters in these job application portals. Now, the fact that we now have a generalist tool that allows every applicant to calibrate and fine-tune and clean up their application, in my opinion, is a much better state to be in than the state where people who have access to those keyword management tools would get a head step up or heads up on everybody else.
Yeah, I think that brings up the question of equity in all of this, and it's hard to run a model if you do not have internet and don't have access to that. But I'm wondering, yeah, if any of you would like to speak to equity in all of this and policies that are going forward and ideas there.
Do you mind if I go?
Yes, go for it.
I'm not trying to hog the podium, it's just this issue is very near and dear to my heart. Back in 2022, I remember every one of my colleagues was panicking because they didn't know how to perform evaluation, how to do assessment of students in a class. Immediately after, many schools, K-12, as well as many universities, decided to ban the use of AI. We surprisingly took a very long time to figure out that ban is a very good PR line for certain populations, but has no mapping to the real world. Everybody was using AI. And now, today, there are policies for AI use. However, one of the things that we've noticed is that students who pay for premium subscription end up getting better grades than students who only use the free version. Now, this is an equity issue that I believe is in need of both tactical and strategic solutions. I think the fact that we still do not have a coherent view or a policy on how AI can be adopted, the fact that we still think that there are things that need to be done completely by humans because, well, for various reasons, but one of which is pride in our genetic composition, probably. We are Homo sapiens, so we are better than anything non-organic. That view is still prevalent in many communities, but at the same time, many of my colleagues in academia, as well as many in the industry, don't know what the right policy should be for adoption, which results in inequitable outcomes.
Right, and in terms of pedagogy, I think we can recognize there's a difference between learning as a student and joining the workforce, and they're obviously linked and connected, but does anyone want to share a time that AI pedagogy or pedagogy paired with AI you think has particularly worked, or a moment where that was got right?
Can somebody other than me please go first?
Would it be okay if I went back to the last question
Yes,
on
okay.
equity? So December 2023, McKinsey released a report that if we're not thoughtful with how we roll out generative AI, it has the potential to increase the racial wealth gap by $43 billion a year, versus if we're more intentional and thoughtful with training, retraining opportunities, has the potential to narrow the racial wealth gap. They did a digital equity study in Connecticut. More than 1 in 4 families were not connected to high-speed internet. More than 1 in 3, and this is a survey of 4,000 families, more than 1 in 3 failed basic digital literacy. And so now we're telling people to get a job, and last year, Microsoft LinkedIn survey, knowledge economy jobs, 2/3 of the companies would only hire you if you have generative AI skills. 72% would take someone with less experience in generative AI skills over someone with more experience, right? And so now we're saying that this is a requirement for working, and we know that people don't necessarily have access to internet, to the paid models, right, the freer versions, and you see that difference. And so we need to be very thoughtful, right, with what we're doing. And offering, obviously, if 1 in 4 families aren't connected, offering online training is not the only way to go. And so we need to try to work, and we're trying to go from the state in a 2-generation route. We're working on developing a Connecticut Teen AI Academy, partnering with Boys and Girls Clubs. When the students fill out the parents fill out the permission slip, would you like to enroll in the AI Academy? And also trying to partner with nonprofits and other trusted validators. Because one of the things is there's a book, Recode America. One of the lines that really stuck out in that book to me was that for many people, it's not creating a new relationship with government, it's repairing a deeply broken relationship. And so we can't just create training and tell people to do things and say, it's going to be good for you, right? We need to partner with these third-party validators and the boots on the ground in the different neighborhoods.
I'd just maybe like to take a little bit of a different perspective with it, because there's one particular group of individuals in the workforce that I think, as a sort of very specific niche example, we have a number of women in particular who take time off when they have families and they're growing a presence at home. They leave the workforce for a pretty substantial amount of time, and there's a tremendous amount of growth and adaptation and technical use case that is, I mean, it becomes a really big cavern at a certain point for just, the 5-10 years until your children are school-aged in many cases. To sort of put a spotlight a little bit on the opportunity as a sort of optimistic lens artificial intelligence puts to a group like that, many of whom are my peers. You have some version of an artificial intelligence unit in most cases in your pocket. Walking out of the door with a little bit of confidence in asking a couple silly questions in a vacuum that sort of give you the reminder that you still got the chops, if you will, in a really important capacity to return to the workforce, to upskill where possible. I would sort of argue that to a certain degree, elements like that, and not to pinpoint that one group alone, but recognizing there are many instances in which there's an element of imposter syndrome, there is absolute inequity that exists, and you are trying to sort of, for your own benefit, level the playing field. There is the ability to utilize artificial intelligence in a really consumer-driven fashion that I would say sort of changes a little bit of the game in a way that's actually quite optimistic and very positive.
Thank you. In all of this, this requires investment, this requires funding. Do you feel like you've seen investment in that pay off to anyone?
I mean, I can respond. So outside of the mammograms, we also have utilized an AI technology to assess everyone who comes in and has any type of lung CT. Let's say they've had a car accident, or they're coming in for not routine, but they're coming in for chest pain, or they're part of a lung cancer screening program. We now have worked with a company and helped validate their model that also shows if there's coronary artery calcification in the heart. So typically a person would have to go, they pay out of pocket, it used to be about $150, it's now to about $275 to get this calcium score. So has anybody in the room had a calcium score done? Right, so you've had it, and usually paying for it by yourself. Now, any Yeah, you did too. Yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, it can potentially be life-saving because a lot of people don't know they have calcification in their arteries, and when you find out, there's lifestyle modifications. There are drugs, if needed, that can help reduce your chance of having a heart attack or a stroke. So now anyone who walks through the door at Stamford Hospital has a lung CT or chest CT for any reason at all, gets 2 additional scores. So they get a coronary artery calcification score for free. It's not any extra charge, but it's a software company that we had to invest in. We had to buy the software and have it integrated with our technology. And the second, now in the last few weeks, it now gives us a score if they have calcifications on their aortic valve, which also can be a bad indicator if someone is going to have a heart attack or a stroke later on in life. So that takes money. It takes planning. You can't just say, okay, we're going to implement it next week. Not only do we help validate it now, both of those are FDA cleared, and we're using both now directly to impact patient care, but it has to be thoughtful. And we have to say, okay, we also, how many are Stamford Hospital, your doctors, or you visited the hospital, we just went into a new medical record, Epic. That also costs lots and lots of money. So it's thinking about how do we bring in the technologies that can potentially impact our patients while we're leveraging a new medical record, which is also very, very powerful. It's integrated our inpatient, our outpatient into one powerful medical record, and you can also share now if your other providers are on Epic. So it's trying to figure out what do we do and in what cadence do we do it, because it costs money, and we know that healthcare is an increasing cost. It's under attack with, there's so many different things that are really impacting how much people are paying. So we want to make sure we're thoughtful in not increasing the cost of patients' care, but also giving them the best possible care that we can.
With that, in securing that tech investment, what were the naysayers saying, or what were the obstacles to that, and how did you overcome that?
Well, we started implementing that as we were getting ready to implement the new EMR. So it was really, why would you be doing both things at the same time? But it's such a powerful tool, and it's a way to make sure that the patients do not have to pay something extra. And so it's that conversation. It was also a heavy lift with our IT infrastructure. So you're bringing in a software, it has to integrate with the medical record, it has to integrate with reading these exams. So it always comes down to money. So it's how do you allocate, when do you put the money into one bucket over another one? And so I think that's typically the game we're playing in healthcare, is when can you use the money, when is the best time to use it, and how do you balance all these competing priorities that are coming at us?
I'll give a couple of examples, I guess, where the state we've invested some money. So one, we mentioned the Online AI Academy. Our goal was to educate 1,000 people in the first year. We had over 2,000 people go through the program in the first couple months. Second, we were able to allocate money to Yale Center for Health Innovation, and they created a Health AI Olympics in Connecticut. And so they had a number of contestants. They awarded the winners. So again, the role of the state is to help incentivize AI for good, right? To give people the opportunity to fail, to put in money where you're doing research that can potentially benefit society. And then the third, we were able to get some money to run pilot programs in the school systems. And actually Westport was one of 6 that ran a pilot program in terms of using AI within the school. We were able to then identify 5 different programs that statewide that the schools could choose from. And so we're just getting all the results back from them. They had different districts, suburban district, urban district, rural district within that. And so we're gonna look at those results and hopefully use that to decide how we should be investing our money going forward.
Right, getting that money, James, you have to go to the legislature. I wanted to ask, what are the obstacles that you've faced in getting that money, getting those allocations, and how you've overcome those?
Yeah, those were a little, it was, for a little while, we had ARPA money, which is no longer there, which was from the federal relief. And so a lot of that money came from the ARPA money. So it is working through the budget process and then working with your colleagues and with the agencies to get people to recognize and to also support an issue.
Yeah, how has, are there other ways the current federal government has impacted Connecticut's AI moving forward?
So, there was proposed moratorium on any state-level AI legislation that was part of the original version of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And there's actually, Brennan Center did an analysis of what laws it may have prevented from going into effect. And there were 40 states where they found something, nothing in Connecticut. But that didn't end up making it into the final version of the bill. There are some things, so there was the AI action plan that the federal government put out, and part of that, there are things that we can probably try to leverage, right? I think it's always best if there's a new federal program, if the state can put some money on it or work with that to leverage the effectiveness. So they are looking at creating sandboxes, right? Delaware created one last year. Texas,
What's a
Utah.
sandbox, just for the audience?
Yes, I'm sorry. I get going and I forget that people don't know what I'm talking about. So regulatory sandboxes. And so the first one that was created in the United States for a state level was in Utah. And so a company came in, the first one that went through there, the first contract that was signed was for a mental health chatbot. And then they said, okay, if you do these certain things, then they basically give you certainty, regulatory certainty on what's going to happen and how they won't have penalties or lawsuits.
Is it like a closed system on that company, or?
So a regulatory sandbox, so right, there are, and sometimes I think of it as a safe testing where you would go in versus the regulatory sandbox is more just creating a contract with a company, and then they gave them some, like when I talked to someone from the Utah, the regulatory sandbox, they said, oddly enough, that the company who went through their sandbox had way more regulations than if they had just launched their product in there. But they ended up
like a trial with one company, kind of.
Exactly, it's a trial. And so theirs was the mental health chatbot. Then based on that experience, they passed chatbot legislation after that. Texas is just going to launch theirs. Delaware's regulatory sandbox is focused on agentic AI. And the uses of agentic AI, and it just got passed legislatively this past year. The other things are workforce development, and so they want DOL, they've instructed them to change some of the data we're collecting so that we're looking at job loss related to AI, so we can study that if there is, where it happens, and that's something with our state we can look at. And we had looked at, New York State started collecting that data last year, and so it's something we can look at changing. There's workforce development and emphasis from the AI action plan on workforce development, and then out of the One Big Beautiful Bill, they created workforce Pell Grants. So if you've ever heard of the Pell Grant is for college now, and so it's for degrees, right? Associate degree or a bachelor's degree. Now they've created workforce Pels. So if you're getting certifications or short term, and so that's another thing we'll want to see, how can we layer that on to some of the programs we've created in the state.
Right, so opportunities for Connecticut to build on that.
Correct.
I just wanted to mention a couple other things that on the investment side that I think are worth getting really excited about. So from the governor's office, we recently launched the first award towards our $100 million allocation for innovation clusters. The first award recipient is, generally speaking, a group of organizations in New Haven that include not just elements of advancement in artificial intelligence around all of the applications we received, but in particular in New Haven, Quantum CT. And Quantum CT, if AI is the topic of today and we're getting excited about it real time today, quantum should be what gets us excited in the next 5-10-ish years. If you consider AI to be somewhat sort of process-oriented in a very linear fashion to solve the problem and get it done, quantum conceivably, as a very high-level description, would take same problem and infinite potential solutions all at one time in a very quick period. The technologies are really exciting. They cascade in a way that should have all of us really excited about its potential. But $50.5 million was allocated more specifically to the focus of quantum CT and biotechnologies in New Haven. And quantum CT is really important because we have two research institutions in the state of Connecticut that partnered together and both put a significant investment in for the sake of their staff and financial contributions to this effort. UConn and Yale partnering together and collaborating on quantum CT is an investment coming from the state and the governor's office around innovation clusters that should get us very exciting. Financial technologies, right? So elements of cybersecurity tend to fall into that space as we talk about it, and other elements of finance. That was thematically some of the things that we saw in other applications that we received, in addition to things inside of insurance. So there's a lot of applicability when we're talking about service-oriented or technology-oriented industries that produce a lot of data. And innovation clusters was a tremendous investment from the state, designed very specifically to embolden those things to push the limits, because we want to be ahead of the curve, not behind it. The other thing I'll mention is in specifically the startup space, we in the state have a venture capital arm. So we have an organization that many of you may be aware of, but if not, there's an organization called Connecticut Innovations, not to be confused with Office of Innovation. But our Connecticut Innovations is the state's venture capital arm. And so when we're talking about investment and taking risk and pushing, once again, that limit of technology, there was actually a fund dedicated to investment in artificial intelligence there as well that's organized and run and operated out of that office. So these are industries that are very present as well as future looking, and they're massive investments that are happening at the state level here to make sure that we continue to lean into those innovations.
Thank you. So we've got lots of examples here of just what's been done so far and what's coming ahead in terms of AI innovation in Connecticut. Now we'll move to questions from the audience. So if you can go, yeah, I'll hand to Joanne.
Okay, first of all, I just would like to say thank you to our moderator and to the panel today. For folks who have questions, we'd like you please to line up starting here and going back. And we'd also please ask you to limit your questions to one question so that we can get to as many as possible. Okay, come on up.
And if you can share your name and where you're from today, where you're coming from.
Hi, my name's Greg. I'm from Westport. This is a question for the Senator. Senator, as you may know, the top 3 living AI scientists have all expressed serious concern that AI causes an existential risk to humanity. We've talked a lot about resume reviews, discrimination. I'd like to know if the broader picture is on your radar, and if you feel you have an obligation to move that inside of the Overton window so we can have serious discussions about what this rapidly accelerating technology might do to the human race over the course of the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you have different viewpoints, right? In that some people think it's going to end humanity, some people think it's the best ever, and that's why, to me, it's going to change, create a utopia, and that's why to me, it was crazy when they wanted to have a federal moratorium on doing any legislation, because in medicine, if you had something, you said this is either going to kill you or it's going to cure you, but we have to let it play out, that say you can't test it, you can't do anything. My concern has been more focusing on the known existing risks. There have been 2 major bills that were passed that focused on the catastrophic risk. Governor Newsom from California just signed into effect their catastrophic risk bill.
1053, 1047 failed, which was a much better one, but go ahead.
Yeah, 1047 failed, and 53 was signed into effect. And then New York State, Alex Barras had passed the RAISE Act, which is a similar bill. And New York State is a very interesting process that after the bills pass, then they negotiate with the governor and they do chapter amendments, but it's likely that that bill will get signed into effect. And so there will likely be more states considering that. Victoria Gu had run a version of that in Rhode Island last year that she'll be bringing that back. But right now, I'm focused on the knowns, and then we'll see, but it is something that, my concern for the next session, we've seen so many chatbot harms coming through. Even in Connecticut, there was the murder-suicide in Greenwich where ChatGPT had validated a man's, I guess, hallucinations and his, he was getting his conspiracy theories against his mother. He thought she was conspiring to harm him, and he killed his mother and then took his own life. There's so many children, unfortunately, who have done that. So I'm focused on the chatbot legislation and then employment legislation for next session. But it is something that, we do need to look at that going forward.
The governor has vetoed some of your legislation on the basis of it being too early.
Sorry, can we keep it to
I would
one?
urge you not to make the same mistake with a rapidly accelerating technology.
Pardon,
It's
we're
never
gonna keep
too
it
early
just-
to think about existential risk.
We're going to keep it to one question.
That was a comment.
No, thank you.
Hi, Stephanie from Norwalk. Switching gears a little bit. So data use in government can help make a huge difference, I think, in whether or not we are using tax dollars as efficiently as possible to solve a problem. Yet government agencies are often limited in the ways they can collaborate based on many different silos. So I am curious if anyone here either knows of or can foresee the state working on how to more efficiently break down these silos and allow more data sharing among agencies.
I smile because you described my euphoria of all of our agencies coordinating. And I think the truth of the matter is that we absolutely have a lot of work to do. And being on the ground, being in these organizations, there is a willingness and a desire to make sure that from those that are doing on the ground level, all the way up through the decision-making tree, we're really being very smart and intentional with the path forward, frankly, to sort of future-proof systems and processes for the sake of ensuring that no matter what staffing we have, no matter how the leadership transitions, the integrity of the data is retained and shareable. I could geek out over process and operations around it because I really believe in it. I think it substantiates better relationships. It puts a lot of efficiencies in place for very limited staff time. And to your point, I think if you continue to roll that up, there's a lot of bigger potential at a statewide level as well. There's a lot of conversations that happen around it. As you can imagine, just like all private sector industries, there's a lot of discussion around how can we do this better and where can we see the outcomes really be very positive by affecting change. They happen inside of government as well and inside of our state agencies. Different processes and protocols, obviously, to make them actionable at times. But rest assured that just like everybody else, we'd continue to see a lot of value in ensuring that as we in an ongoing capacity, put our heads together, talk tools, talk solutions, talk effective use of artificial intelligence. The shared goals are in mind, and we're trying to figure out which levers to pull at the right time to do so.
I wanted to ask if people want to, on the panel, also have what's the next legislation that you think needs to be passed in Connecticut, or what's kind of the next step that needs to be taken? If anyone wants to answer.
Well, we have a legislator here who probably has a better idea of what's in the works. From our point of view, and our here represents the Connecticut AI Alliance, we have concerns, and we share the concerns of the technical community about long-term and medium-term issues that may arise due to the adoption and advancement of automated decision-making at scale. Job displacement, in my opinion, is going to be a huge issue. Human workers are problem solvers. The problem of AI is the problem of problem solving. So advances that we make in AI results in better solutions to the problem of problem solving, which results in smaller need for human workers. But this is in the long run. I think what needs to be done now is for us to start tracking job displacement because of automation. We hear different results, different statistics from studies coming from the consultancy industry or the tech industry. Having a reliable source of data to be able to model out and predict the impact of AI on job displacement, in my opinion, is not only a good idea, but it's critical for us to be able to prevent any potential catastrophic failure of our economy, which is based on work.
I just wanted to acknowledge Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas for asking her question, and that you shocked me. I thought it was going to be an elections one.
I'll hold that for
I was preparing in my mind, and I'm like, boop, boop. And then, but as far as, I think it is important that I would love to work with you on this. One of the things, we were able to get several tech fellows in the legislature, and we were able to get a budget for an implementation tech fellow to assist us with implementing pilot programs. And we started with the legislative branch because that's what we control as legislators, but love to work with the executive branch agencies to find examples of pilot programs that we can put in effect to help us operate more efficiently and effectively and serve our constituents better.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have the next question.
Hi, I'm Vijay from Westport, and this question is for Dr. Rose. So in your research, have you seen your diagnostic accuracy improve? And if so, right, have the consequences improved in reduction of malpractice and insurance costs?
As far as malpractice and insurance costs, that's definitely not my realm of expertise, and I would say it's above my pay grade. But our physicians are excited about using AI. Our physicians are asked to read so many more images now, see so many more patients. So to have AI tools that are augmenting their workflow, that basically allow them to be more efficient. So we're implementing a new software. I sit on the AI governance committee, and I chair one of the subcommittees. So at Stanford, any AI tool comes to this committee. We have a policy and procedure, and it guides us. And so this new tool, for example, has a 99% negative predictor of if a woman has no findings on her mammogram. So this is going to be implemented along with our radiology team so that they have that confidence. It's actually 99.9% confident to say that there are no negative findings. So they're still gonna read it. They're gonna read it as they would, but they're gonna spend more time on those that have come back as positive, or that say, this might be a BI-RADS 3 or a 4, which is indicative that there may be an issue, but they're gonna actually spend more time because they have this confidence from using this AI augmentation. So I feel like it is an exciting time for the physicians. Of course, they have to embrace it, they have to want to use it. Also, they're starting to use technology in their dictations. If you're seeing 20 patients a day, instead of spending so much time at night, when you may forget an essential detail because you're exhausted, and we call it pajama charting. Our physicians are working so incredibly hard. So now they're able to have that done in real time, and if they say, we're gonna order an MRI, it's actually coming into the medical record as they are dictating, talking to their patient. They're not on a computer or facing away. They're talking to their patient and not even typing anything and having more of a relationship with their patient in the 15 to 20 minutes that they get. And if they've said, we're gonna order an MRI, the Epic already has it queued up to basically say, this is what the next things are for the patient. They're gonna have labs. These are potential dates they could go have their MRI done. So I think a lot more will be published on malpractice and things of that nature. I think it's still pretty early that we're using it, but I mean, for the most part, physicians I've talked to that I interact with, they're excited about not working 16, 20 hours a day, but actually interacting more with their patients and spending time on the harder cases that they need to.
All right, thank you.
I would just add that one of the benefits that you're asking about specifically in the way of malpractice insurance and other things that are costs are ultimately the things as downstream benefits that startups, in particular in the healthcare space and biotechnology spaces, even some of the other service-oriented tools that happen in hospitals, doctors' offices, all over the world. Those are the kinds of things that they are looking to solve for as part of their implementation of these technologies. So there's, again, a little optimism and hope there as a downstream byproduct of some of these things effectively implemented.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Alice, and I grew up here in Westport, but Now live in New Milford, and ChatGPT-4 helped me find my new house, actually found my new house. And so I'm a subscriber. I have been since the beginning, and have a background in tech communications, and currently I'm a journalist. And most recently I interviewed Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soares' new book called If Anybody Builds It, Everybody Dies. And they do believe that we already have known knowns about existential risk. Specifically, the large language models have been shown to lie sometimes, sometimes to blackmail, and other times to be aware of being tested and changing the way they behave when they're being tested. So there are many ways we can't predict what they're going to do. And in other engineering projects, usually we don't, build a building unless we know it's going to stay up or have a pretty good idea it's going to stay up. So we do pause the project if it looks like we don't know that. And it's great, the book addresses it from an engineering standpoint as a challenge. So I think my question specifically probably for Senator Maroney would be, who in Connecticut is focusing on the potential known knowns about existential risk?
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned engineering and other issues. I look back to an analogy with AI and thinking of the elevator, right? And when the elevator was first invented, it was to move like materials like in furniture stores or move feedstock and things up and down. It wasn't used for people until Elijah Otis invented the elevator brake. And historically demonstrated it at the World's Fair. He stood on the platform, they cut the rope, it went, and it stopped. And then people saw it was safe. And after that, we radically transformed our urban areas. We built up instead of out. We knew we could move people in different ways. We're not going to see the full radical transformation until people feel a little safer, I think. And so one of that is putting in my mind, transparency, a right to know when it's being used to make an important decision. There are, of the legislators who are looking at it, I mean, there are a lot of people, every year more and more people reach out to me. Representative, why am I blanking on his name now? I think it's the bright light out there that's making me nervous. I talk to him every day, who co-chairs the AI caucus. So we've created a caucus of legislators, and that's growing. And then people have been reaching out. So in Danbury, Bob Godfrey is a member of the AI caucus. Rep Hubert Delaney is the co-chair of the AI caucus in Stamford. And just this week, I had met with other reps to discuss some of these issues and their concerns. So it is, I think people, again, I'm an optimist. I am actually more of an optimist, but I know that there's not zero downside. And until we mitigate that, we're not going to see the full upside.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it sounds like you're saying the best place to start is with the AI caucus. They would probably be the ones focusing on this issue.
In the legislature, I would say, yes.
And I wanted to ask, are there specific regulations next session that you're looking at passing?
Yeah, I mean, next year, we'll look at bringing back, it'll be a caucus priority bill. And again, we're kind of expanding out who we're working with on it and looking at it in three parts again with protect, promote, empower, right? So some protections. I think next year it'll be narrower on the protections. And one of the things we've seen.
Could you be more specific on like the parts of that?
Yeah, oh yeah, so I'm sorry. So the protect will be looking at chatbot legislation in requiring that unless you've tested against sexual explicit conversation, we've seen Meta has, the chatbots have led children into sexually explicit conversations. New York State had a chatbot law that passed this last year, so did Maine. But New York State and the California chatbot legislation were around if a user is expressing suicidal ideations, you have to stop the conversation and point them to resources. So it's going to be focused around protections for children and then the suicidal ideation. I'm also concerned about seniors using because there are a lot of products that are pushed for seniors with the loneliness epidemic, and I'm concerned that if we're not testing the chatbots that they're using as well, there's a concern. So, and then looking at employment more in the transparency. We did pass some transparency as part of the data privacy that you have a right to know.
And what transparency? Like what's
So you would have a right to know, looking at establishing a right to know if AI is being used to make a decision about your employment, and then
for existing employees or for hiring or both?
yeah, I think I would focus on the hiring aspect, although California had a bill that was more focused on the promotion and task allocation in there. And so those would be the regulatory pieces. Promote would be how do we promote AI in business, so hoping to work with DECD on this year, but looking to expand some of our programs. We're looking to create the AI Small Business Academy, but looking at what are the other things we can do. But also promote is with workforce. So I want to look at expanding. We created a Pay It Forward Success program, which is we had $5 million fund, and it was used to pay the tuition for someone who's doing a short-term training program, and then they pay it back out of their income. They also get a stipend, because for a lot of people who drop out of school, who are stopped, the barrier wasn't as much the tuition as life gets in the way, right? If you're a single mother, who's going to pay for your child care? Who's going to pay for your rent? You can't just stop and go through that. And so there was a monthly stipend, but I'd like to also pair that, to expand that to AI training, and pair that with the Workforce Pell, with the new Early Childhood Trust Fund that we've created. And again, making things easier for people with training. We're looking at K to 12 this year, studying from those pilot programs. And then the Empower is to look at how to empower the state government to use AI to better serve our constituents.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm Sam. I'm from New Canaan, so not too far from here. I wanted to ask about the cooperation that you've had on bringing AI into the educational sphere, and particularly with UConn and Yale. So I'm a historian by background, and I'm just wondering, has there been any talk of digital humanities or linking existing research to these new AI initiatives?
So I would just say that as it relates to artificial intelligence and the collaboration with the universities, they tend to sort of lead the charge. They are understandably so some of the louder voices that come to the conversation, and that's part of what bore out the relationship with UConn and Yale specifically. Although we, do have a number of other really prestigious universities inside of the state as well. Their collaboration to build Quantum CT was really the first of its kind in this region for establishing the forward thinking to advanced technologies, even beyond artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of discussion around curriculum. I mean, there were, computer science degrees that didn't exist before the internet was a thing, right? Those come out of things like the universities because they continue to try to push the limits of what we need to know, not just for today, but for the student population of tomorrow as well. So yes, we continue to have conversations and partnerships with them. Part of the very fortunate charge of the Office of Innovation that I represent by the leadership of our Chief Innovation Officer is very specifically collaborations with the universities for exactly case examples like you're describing there, to make sure that for something that doesn't uniquely affect just one of us, we're all around the same table to make sure that there's something delivered that benefits all.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to follow up on that and say there exists a number of collaborative efforts between universities, one of which is the Connecticut AI Alliance. It's a consortium of 21 universities across the state, as well as community and industry action groups. And the aim is to address the same sort of issues that affect everyone in higher ed, as well as issues that affect the community and the industry in general in relation to workforce development, talent pipeline, research, and of course, expertise in AI, which seems to be in quite a bit of a demand from small and medium-sized corporations, as well as larger size industry alike.
Do you have a question?
Yes, please. Hi, everyone. My name is Stan Foucault. I'm from Stratford, and I'm glad to be here. Now, as we speak, AI is definitely taking over. It's changing the landscaping, business, everything. So education, I mean, you name it. So how can we use this powerful tool in areas for younger children in education specifically? How can we use that for children that are really in areas that are in great needs and where their needs are major improvement? How can we implement that in these areas, different cities and where there's a gap, and so we can, just mitigate and minimize the gap in terms of the education and learning process for the children.
Yeah, no, thank you. Excellent question. And my concern is the less resourced school districts and not being able to figure this out. Let me give one example of one of the pilot programs. It was, so the pilot programs, we did the 6 pilot programs across the state for trying to figure out how to use AI in curriculum, but it's also working with the teachers and how they can use AI to make themselves more efficient in delivering instruction. And one of the tools that's being used is a tool that allows for differentiated lessons. And so you can upload your lesson, and then it'll create lessons based on the different academic levels of the students. And so one of the problems, if you're a teacher in your class, you have 20 students, they may be at all different levels. So how do you reach them at their level? And so that's one thing, is making sure that we're providing the resources and the training so that we can allow for differentiated education, and looking at it for, later on for assessments when we try to move towards skills-based hiring. If we truly move towards skills-based hiring, this can accelerate that. But I would say the state, we should be identifying tools that the schools can use, and we should be funding for the districts so that it's not on the districts. There are licenses for those tools, as well as providing, they are working on developing model curriculum. So we have what they're called RESCs, Regional Educational Service Centers, which, because we don't have county government in Connecticut, that's kind of the replacement for education. And so EdAdvance is one of the RESCs in the state. They're doing great work on this and creating model curriculum, running professional development, doing professional learning communities. So we need to empower them to assist the districts more, but also the state is going to develop some model curriculum here. So there are a lot of things we need to do, and it is critical that we think about this because, I live in Milford. Our school system has shrunk. I was on the Board of Ed in 2011. There are over 7,000 students. Now there are less than 6,000 students in our school district, and that's not unique. A lot of the suburban school districts are shrinking. The urban school districts are still growing. Our workforce is coming from the urban areas of our state. We need to, and a lot of times those schools are less resourced. We need to be doing everything we can to make sure that we're getting them prepared for this new economy, because that's the future of our state.
Thank you.
I know specifically, I'm from Danbury. My kids have been in the Danbury School District. We have been very privileged, and every child gets a computer. And then along with that, there are resources for internet. So I do feel like that's one step forward. Can you speak about the other districts? I know we're not alone, but it's a very underserved district. But I've always really appreciated that there is always a computer available for the kids.
And I think there are a lot of districts who had done that. I'm not sure how many across the state, but one of the issues, though, is also making sure that when the kids go home, they have high-speed internet to use the device on. Because we're saying lifelong learning is one of the most important skills. You have to test and iterate on models. I think the earlier speaker said the best way to learn about ChatGPT is from ChatGPT, or to go in and ask questions and play around. And it's hard to watch videos to test and iterate on your phone. During the pandemic, we found that a lot of the poorer families in the state connected to the internet only through their phone, which is great for some things, but for learning in that way, having a device and having access to high-speed internet is critical. I think a lot of families, they would go to McDonald's, right, and stay in the parking lot and access the internet there. So trying to make sure that we're getting affordable or free broadband to as many people as we can is also critical.
All right. Well, if we have no more questions, thank you so much, panelists, for coming.
And thank you to our moderator and the panelists as well. At this point, we're going to take a break, folks. I know people have been sitting for a while, so you may want to go for a walk along the river here. You can exit from the lower level and get some fresh air. Our cafe will be open until 5 today, and if you have some concerns about AI, I would highly encourage you to stay and hear our 4 o'clock speaker. Her name is Kate Crawford. She's the author of Atlas of AI, and she will definitely speak to some of the concerns people have. We also have books by 2 other authors who were on stage today, and the cafe closes at 4. Oh, the cafe closes at 4, so don't beat the rush and head right in. Okay, thanks very much. We'll see you at 4.